Think about the last time you were in a meeting, or a heated discussion, or even just a casual conversation with friends. What did you notice about the person who spoke first? Were they the most confident, the most prepared, or were they simply the most eager to be heard? Now, think about the person who stayed quiet, who listened, who held back. What did you assume about them? In our noise-filled world, we're conditioned to believe that leadership is loud, that influence comes from having the first and final word, that silence is a void waiting to be filled. But what if we've had it wrong all along? What if the most respected leaders in history rarely spoke first, not because they had nothing to say, but because they understood something far more profound? That true strength often resides not in the voice, but in the pause that comes before it. This isn't just a modern idea. It's a principle deeply embedded in Stoic philosophy, a school of thought that shaped some of history's most disciplined and effective leaders. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic himself, wrote in his personal meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength, the kind that isn't rushed, isn't reactive, isn't eager to prove itself, often expresses itself first through listening, through observation, through what the Stoics called intentional silence. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself because it's rooted in something unshakable: presence, detachment, and purposeful communication. In this video, we're going to explore why the most respected leaders in history rarely felt the need to speak first. We'll dive into the Stoic practices that help them cultivate presence of mind, emotional detachment in decision-making, and the discipline of intentional speech. What if true power lies not in speaking first, but in listening deeply? What could we gain by embracing the quiet confidence that defined leaders like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Cato? We'll break down how you can apply these principles in your own life, whether you're leading a team, navigating personal relationships, or simply striving to communicate with more clarity and impact. By the end, you may find that the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all until the moment truly calls for it. Stoicism teaches that presence is the foundation of wise action. It's about cultivating a state of full attention and awareness in the moment before you even consider a response. This isn't just about being quiet. It's an active, disciplined practice of grounding yourself in the here and now, setting aside distractions, and truly absorbing what is happening around you without the filter of your immediate judgments. By being fully present, a leader gains a clearer, more accurate assessment of any situation, which allows them to avoid the pitfalls of reactive speech, those words spoken in haste that we often wish we could take back. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus captured this idea perfectly when he advised, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." This choice, this space between an event and our reaction, is where presence lives. It's in that space that we can focus on what is actually within our control, our own thoughts, our judgments, and our subsequent actions, rather than being swept away by the chaos of the moment. We can see this principle embodied in historical figures like Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his unwavering Stoic principles. In the heated, often volatile debates of the Roman Senate, Cato was famous for his deliberate silence. While others rushed to be the first to voice an opinion, to score a political point, or to shout down an opponent, Cato would often remain quiet, listening intently and observing. This wasn't a sign of weakness or a lack of ideas. On the contrary, his silence commanded attention and respect. When he finally did choose to speak, his words carried immense weight because they were clearly the product of careful thought and measured judgment, not fleeting emotion. His presence in those chambers was a powerful force because it was rooted in a calm, unwavering self-awareness that others simply couldn't disrupt. Now, take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Can you recall a recent conversation or meeting where you felt that urge to jump in, to defend your point, to have your voice heard immediately? Perhaps you spoke too quickly and later regretted your tone or your words. Maybe a misunderstanding escalated because you reacted to the first thing you heard instead of taking a breath to understand the full context. In that moment, the absence of presence likely led to a less than ideal outcome. Now, imagine how that same scenario might have unfolded if you had channeled that Stoic discipline. If you had given yourself just a few seconds of full attention, listening not just to the words being said, but to the intent behind them, and observing the dynamics at play, how might your response have been different? That is the power of presence. It's the quiet strength that comes from realizing you don't have to have an immediate answer for everything. Sometimes, the wisest action is to simply be there completely and let your awareness guide you rather than your impulse. How can detaching from our initial impulses actually lead to wiser, more effective leadership? It might seem counterintuitive. After all, we often associate strong leadership with passion and conviction. But Stoicism introduces a crucial distinction: the difference between being driven by raw emotion and being guided by reasoned judgment. This is where the practice of cognitive detachment comes into play. It's not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about creating a vital space between the first spark of a feeling and the action we ultimately take. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of critically examining our initial impressions before we accept them as truth and allow them to dictate our behavior. By doing this, we dramatically reduce the likelihood of biased, hasty, or purely emotional responses that can derail our judgment and damage our relationships. Marcus Aurelius offered perhaps the clearest guide to this practice in his Meditations. He wrote, "Objective judgment now at this very moment, unselfish action now at this very moment. Willing acceptance now at this very moment of all external events. That's all you need." This objective judgment is the cornerstone of cognitive detachment. It's the act of observing your thoughts and emotions as they arise, almost like a scientist studying interesting phenomena without immediately getting swept away by them. You might feel a surge of anger during a criticism, but instead of lashing out, you pause. You note the anger, acknowledge its presence, and then you ask yourself, is this reaction proportional? Is it useful? What is the rational response here? This simple act of observation creates a buffer, a moment of freedom where you can choose your response rather than being a passenger in your own emotional storm. Consider the stark contrast between a reactive modern leader and a Stoic philosopher like Seneca. In today's fast-paced world, we often celebrate the leader who shoots from the hip, who makes snap decisions, and who dominates a conversation with forceful, immediate opinions. But this approach is often a liability. A reactive leader offended by a colleague's comment might send a blistering email that burns bridges and creates lasting resentment. Their impulse, unchallenged, becomes an action with negative consequences. Now contrast that with Seneca, who tirelessly advocated for pausing before speaking or acting. He advised, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. That delay is the essence of cognitive detachment. It's in that pause that we can interrogate our initial impression. Was that comment actually a personal attack, or was it a poorly worded piece of feedback? Is my anger serving any purpose other than self-satisfaction? By inserting that moment of delay, a Stoic leader transforms a potential conflict into an opportunity for understanding and measured action. This practice is incredibly relevant to the small, daily interactions that define our lives. Think about one common situation. You're stuck in traffic, running late for an important meeting. The initial impulse is frustration, maybe even rage, honking the horn, muttering at other drivers, your stress levels skyrocketing. This emotional response doesn't clear the traffic. It only poisons your own mind and ensures you arrive flustered and off-center. Now, apply cognitive detachment. You observe the feeling of panic and frustration. You acknowledge it. I am feeling stressed because I am late. Then you detach from the impulse to react emotionally. You ask, is this emotion within my control? Is it helping the situation? The traffic is external. It is outside your control. Your emotional response, however, is within your control. By detaching from the initial impulse, you can choose a more rational response, perhaps calling to notify you'll be late, accepting the delay, and using the time to listen to an audiobook or organize your thoughts for the meeting. The circumstance didn't change, but your judgment of it did, leading to a completely different outcome. Where in your own daily routine could this kind of detachment create a better outcome? It might be when you receive critical feedback from your boss, and your first impulse is to become defensive. Instead, could you pause, detach from the sting of the critique, and examine it for useful truth? It might be during a disagreement with your partner, where the urge to win the argument is overpowering. Could you detach from that competitive impulse and instead seek to understand their perspective? Identifying just one recurring situation where your initial emotional impulse tends to lead you astray is the first step. The next time it arises, practice that Stoic pause. Observe the impression without immediately buying into it. See if that small moment of detachment doesn't grant you a clarity and composure you never knew you had access to. In Stoicism, silence isn't passive, it's a disciplined choice. It's a form of strength, a deliberate act of self-mastery where we consciously choose to withhold our words not out of uncertainty or fear, but out of a deeper understanding of their power and impact. This practice creates a vital space for reflection, allowing us to process information fully, weigh our responses, and ensure that when we do speak, our words are aligned with reason and virtue rather than fleeting emotion or ego. By embracing this discipline, we prevent unnecessary conflict, avoid misspeaking, and cultivate a clarity of mind that is essential for wise leadership and thoughtful communication. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, understood this power profoundly. He once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just a clever turn of phrase, it was a foundational principle of his philosophy. Zeno recognized that true understanding and effective action come from a place of attentive listening and observation. Speaking first or speaking often stems from a desire to be seen or heard, to assert dominance, or to alleviate our own discomfort with quiet. But the Stoic exercises the muscle of restraint, understanding that wisdom often resides in what is left unsaid until the perfect moment. We can see this strategic use of silence throughout history, particularly in the corridors of power in ancient Rome. Roman statesmen and orators were trained in the art of rhetoric, but the wisest among them knew that eloquence wasn't about the quantity of words but their quality and timing. In high-stakes negotiations or Senate debates, they would often employ prolonged silence as a tactical tool. By not immediately revealing their position or reacting to a provocation, they could observe their opponents, gauge their weaknesses, and control the emotional temperature of the room. This silent observation allowed them to gather invaluable intelligence and respond with precision rather than presumption. Their silence wasn't empty. It was full of potential and power, forcing others to sit with their own words and often revealing their true intentions. This ancient practice is just as relevant today. Imagine you're in a difficult conversation where tensions are starting to rise. the natural impulse is to jump in, to defend, to explain, to fill the anxious quiet with sound. But what happens if, instead, you consciously decide to stay silent for just a few heartbeats longer? That space allows the initial emotional charge to dissipate. It gives you a moment to truly hear what the other person is saying, to consider their perspective, and to formulate a response that addresses the root of the issue rather than just the surface-level words. This small act of discipline can prevent a minor disagreement from escalating into a major conflict and can transform a heated exchange into a productive dialogue. I invite you to try this for yourself. Sometime in the next 24 hours, choose to practice intentional silence for a set period. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can be as simple as committing to listening without formulating a response during a 5-minute chat with a coworker, or resisting the urge to offer an immediate opinion when a family member shares a problem. Just observe what happens both within you and in the reaction of others. Do you feel a sense of increased calm and control? Do you notice that you understand the nuances of the conversation better? Does the other person, perhaps feeling truly heard for once, become more open and less defensive? The effects can be quietly profound, revealing that what we often dismiss as mere silence is, in fact, one of the most active and powerful tools for clarity and connection we possess. Why do we feel the urge to speak immediately? Often, it's ego. That compulsion to be the first voice heard, to assert our opinion, to demonstrate our intelligence or defend our position. It rarely comes from a place of pure, rational necessity. Instead, it springs from a deeper, more primal need for validation, for recognition, or to simply feel in control of a conversation. We want to be seen as the expert, the problem solver, the one who has the answers. Stoicism identifies this drive for what it truly is, a trap. It's the ego's way of seeking external approval and reinforcing our own self-importance, often at the expense of genuine understanding and effective communication. The Stoic alternative is humility, a virtue not of weakness but of immense strength. It's the conscious decision to prioritize truly understanding a situation and the people in it over the immediate gratification of being heard. This humility allows a leader to subdue their own inner noise, the need to be right, to win, to be perceived a certain way, in order to serve the larger goal of wisdom and collective good. The philosopher Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood the futility of seeking validation from others, offered a powerful antidote to this ego trap. He taught, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. That phrase, appear clueless or stupid, is so counter to everything our ego wants. Our ego wants to appear sharp, informed, and impressive at all times. But Epictetus suggests that real improvement, real growth, requires letting go of that need. He is essentially saying that the pursuit of wisdom is far more important than the preservation of your own image. This extends directly to conversation. When you resist the urge to speak first, you might momentarily appear less knowledgeable to others. Your ego will hate this. It will scream at you to jump in and prove your worth. But the Stoic leader recognizes that this momentary appearance is an extraneous matter. It is outside of their control and therefore irrelevant to their true purpose. What is within their control is their own pursuit of understanding and virtue, and that often begins with listening. History provides a compelling example of this principle in action with the figure of George Washington. While not a Stoic in the classical sense, he was renowned for his immense self-control and quiet demeanor, traits highly valued in Stoic philosophy. During the heated debates of the Constitutional Convention, where towering intellects and massive egos like Alexander Hamilton and Patrick Henry clashed frequently, Washington often remained silent. He presided over the convention with a notable calmness, listening intently to every argument without feeling the need to constantly interject his own opinion. This silence was not passive, it was a strategic and humble choice. By refusing to let his own ego dominate the room, he created a space where others could speak freely, and his eventual, carefully chosen words carried far greater weight precisely because they were so rare. His silence disarmed the aggression of others. It's difficult to remain locked in a heated, personal argument when the most respected person in the room is simply observing you with calm, patient eyes. His composure served as a calming influence, a constant reminder that the goal was not individual victory but the creation of a nation. Now, take a moment to turn this lens inward. Can you recall a specific instance in your own recent past where your desire to speak was fueled primarily by ego? Perhaps it was in a team meeting when a colleague proposed an idea, and you immediately countered with a better one, not because theirs was flawed, but because you felt a need to establish your own cleverness. Maybe it was during a disagreement with a friend or partner, where you were so focused on crafting your next rebuttal that you stopped listening to what they were actually saying, your only goal being to win the point and prove yourself right. That burning feeling in your chest, that urgency to have your voice dominate, that is the ego at work. It convinces us that being perceived as right is more important than finding what is actually right. It tells us that our value is tied to our verbal dominance. Stoicism asks us to challenge that notion relentlessly. The next time you feel that familiar surge of urgency to speak, pause and ask yourself this simple, humbling question. Am I about to speak because it is necessary or because I simply want to be heard? The answer might just change the entire course of the conversation. Resilient leaders don't rush to fill silence, they learn from it. They understand that quiet observation isn't an empty space to be feared, but a fertile ground where emotional strength and deep patience can take root and grow. This ability to withstand discomfort, uncertainty, and even provocation without immediately reacting is a hallmark of Stoic endurance, known as apatheia, a state of being undisturbed by destructive passions. It's not about suppressing emotion, but about mastering it through reason, choosing to respond from a place of inner stability rather than being tossed around by every external wave. This resilience transforms silence from a passive state into an active practice of fortitude, building a core of unshakable calm that allows a leader to navigate any storm with clarity and purpose. Marcus Aurelius, facing immense pressures as the Emperor of Rome, constantly reminded himself of this very principle. He wrote in his private meditations, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." This calm mind isn't found in the absence of challenges, but in the disciplined response to them. For Marcus, strength was the direct result of enduring hardship without internal turmoil, of observing chaos without becoming chaotic oneself. His journal was his training ground, a place where he reinforced his ability to pause, to detach from initial impressions of pain or insult, and to find that calm center from which all true strength flows. This practice of silent, internal endurance allowed him to lead an empire through war, plague, and personal tragedy without succumbing to the reactive despair or rage that would have crippled a less disciplined mind. Consider the stark contrast between two leaders facing a high-pressure crisis. The first leader feels the intense discomfort of the situation and reacts impulsively. They immediately call an emergency meeting, dominate the conversation with hastily formed opinions, and issue a flurry of commands based on fear and the need to feel like they are doing something. This reaction might create a lot of noise and activity, but it often stems from a place of inner fragility, a need to control the external world to soothe internal anxiety. The chaos of their speech mirrors the chaos of their mind. Now picture the second leader, one who has cultivated this stoic resilience. They receive the same alarming news. Instead of reacting, they pause. They take a moment of intentional silence to observe the facts, separate them from the emotional panic, and assess the situation with clarity. Their first action might simply be to listen to gather information from their team, to understand the full scope of the problem before uttering a single directive. Their calm presence alone becomes a stabilizing force for everyone else in the room. This leader understands that the most powerful action often begins with a moment of composed inaction. This kind of resilience is a muscle that is built through consistent practice in much smaller, everyday moments. It's the patience to not interrupt someone when you disagree with them, instead silently listening to their entire perspective. It's the strength to endure a frustrating delay without complaining, using the quiet time to collect your thoughts instead of venting your irritation. It's the endurance to sit with the discomfort of not having an immediate answer, trusting that a better solution will emerge if you give it space and quiet contemplation. Every time you choose not to fill a silence with reactive noise, you are actively strengthening your inner core. I encourage you to look at your own life and identify one specific area where your patience could directly enhance your resilience. Is it during your morning commute when traffic tests your temper? Is it in meetings when you feel the urge to instantly challenge a point you disagree with? Or perhaps it's at home when a family member says something that triggers a sharp response. Pick just one of these recurring scenarios. The next time it arises, make a conscious choice to engage your stoic endurance. Don't rush to fill the space. Lean into the slight discomfort of the silence. Observe your impulse to react, feel it, but then let it pass without giving it a voice. See if that small act of withholding doesn't, paradoxically, make you feel far more powerful and in control, building a resilience that prepares you for far greater challenges ahead. Stoicism values listening as highly as speaking, if not more. This might sound surprising in a philosophy often associated with inner strength and self-discipline, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it. How can we hope to act with virtue and wisdom if we don't first take the time to truly understand the world and the people around us? Attentive, deep listening is the gateway to that understanding. It's the practice of fully receiving information before we even think about formulating a response. This goes far beyond just politely waiting for your turn to talk. It's about actively seeking to comprehend the complete message, the words being said, the tone in which they're delivered, and even the intentions or emotions that might be lurking beneath the surface. When we listen in this way, we dramatically reduce the chances of misunderstanding, because we're not filtering everything through our own preconceived notions and just waiting for a pause to insert our own opinion. We're actually allowing another person's reality to enter our own consciousness, and that is where genuine insight and connection are born. Seneca, the great Stoic thinker and advisor, placed immense importance on this skill. He wrote, "I quote another's opinion, for my own is already given." While this line can be interpreted in a few ways, it powerfully illustrates the Stoic humility of prioritizing understanding over being understood. Seneca is essentially saying that before he offers his own view, he will first ensure he has fully heard and accurately represented the views of others. He recognizes that his own opinion is not the only one that matters and that wisdom is a collective pursuit, built by carefully assembling the perspectives of many rather than just loudly proclaiming one. This approach transforms conversation from a battlefield of competing egos into a collaborative search for truth, where listening is the primary tool for discovery. We can see the profound impact of this principle in modern leadership as well. Consider a manager facing a team that has become disengaged and unproductive. A reactive leader might simply announce new rules or deliver a stern lecture, speaking at the team without understanding the root causes of the problem. But a leader who embodies this Stoic value of listening would take a completely different approach. They might call a meeting and simply say, "I want to understand what's happening. Please tell me what you're seeing and what you're feeling." And then, the most important part, they would actually listen. They wouldn't interrupt, they wouldn't get defensive, and they wouldn't immediately try to solve everything. They would just absorb it all. By creating that space and giving their team the gift of feeling truly heard, this leader doesn't just gather valuable information. They build something far more powerful: trust and loyalty. People will follow a leader who they believe understands them, and that understanding can only come from a place of deep, sincere listening. This week, I invite you to turn your next conversation into a small Stoic exercise. Whether you're talking with a coworker, a family member, or a friend, make a conscious decision to practice active listening. Your goal is not to prepare your rebuttal while they speak, but to truly focus on understanding their point of view. Not to show you're engaged, ask clarifying questions like, "What did you mean when you said?" or "Help me understand that better," and resist the urge to immediately share your own story or advice. After the conversation, take just a moment to reflect. What was different? Did you pick up on nuances you normally would have missed? Did the other person seem more engaged or more satisfied with the interaction? You might be surprised by how such a simple shift in focus from speaking to listening can completely transform the quality of your communication and the depth of your relationships. Stoics teach that responding with judgment, not reaction, defines wisdom. This distinction is one of the most practical and powerful tools in the entire Stoic toolkit. A reaction is immediate, raw, and often driven by emotion or ego. It's the verbal equivalent of a reflex, a knee-jerk response to a stimulus without any conscious thought. Judgment, on the other hand, is the product of a deliberate process. It's the act of inserting a crucial pause between an event and your response, using that space to evaluate the situation logically, weigh the potential consequences of your words, and choose an expression that aligns with your values and goals. A reaction is about releasing internal pressure. A judgment is about creating external impact. The former often leads to regret, while the latter builds respect and achieves desired outcomes. This entire process hinges on the foundational Stoic principle, famously articulated by Epictetus, that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. He reminds us that we are not disturbed by external events themselves, but by the judgments we make about those events. An insult only has power if we judge it to be insulting. A setback only becomes a disaster if we judge it to be catastrophic. The Stoic practice, therefore, is to catch that initial, automatic judgment, that first impression, and hold it up to the light of reason before we accept it as truth and allow it to dictate our behavior. This is the moment where wisdom is born, not in the absence of emotion, but in the conscious evaluation of it. You feel the flash of anger, but you judge it to be unhelpful. You feel the urge to defend yourself, but you judge that understanding the other perspective is more important. Your response then flows from that reasoned judgment, not from the raw, unchallenged reaction. We can see this play out with stunning clarity in the world of high-stakes business. Imagine a tech company that experiences a massive public data breach. The initial, reactive response from a leadership team driven by panic would be to go silent, to hide, to issue a terse statement full of legalese that attempts to minimize liability. This reaction is purely defensive, focused on self-preservation, and it almost always backfires, eroding public trust and amplifying the crisis. Now, contrast that with a leadership team that practices this Stoic discipline of judgment over reaction. They receive the same terrifying news. Instead of reacting immediately, they pause. They gather their key advisors and their facts. They judge the situation not as a personal attack to be deflected, but as a problem to be solved for their customers. Their subsequent communication is a masterclass in measured judgment. They acknowledge the issue with transparency, take full responsibility without excuses, and lay out a clear, step-by-step plan to remedy the situation and protect those affected. This response, born from judgment rather than fear, doesn't just manage the crisis, it can actually enhance trust and demonstrate profound leadership in the face of adversity. Think back to your own life for a moment. Can you recall a specific instance where a simple pause made all the difference? Perhaps you received a frustrating email from a colleague, and your immediate reaction was to fire back a sharp reply. But something made you wait. You closed the laptop, took a walk, or slept on it. The next morning, with the initial heat of the reaction cooled, you were able to judge the situation more clearly. You saw that the email wasn't a personal attack, but a poorly worded request from someone who was also under pressure. Your eventual response was calmer, more collaborative, and it led to a productive solution instead of a protracted email argument. That space, that pause, was the difference between a reaction that would have created more problems and a judgment that solved one. It's in these everyday moments that we have the opportunity to exercise our own wisdom, to choose the power of a considered judgment over the fleeting satisfaction of an impulsive reaction. Every word from a Stoic leader carries intention and value. This isn't about being terse or withholding information. It's about elevating communication to an art form where each syllable is chosen with care and purpose. Mindful speech, in the Stoic view, is a direct expression of virtue. It aligns with wisdom by seeking truth, with justice by considering the impact on others, with courage by being direct yet kind, and with self-discipline by resisting the urge to babble, boast, or complain. This approach treats words not as an infinite resource to be spent carelessly, but as a precious currency. Every unnecessary statement is a waste of energy and a potential source of misunderstanding or harm. The goal is to make your speech like a well-crafted piece of art where nothing is extraneous and everything serves a higher purpose of clarity, truth, and good. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius provided a perfect blueprint for this practice in his private writings. He instructed himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This simple, profound command cuts to the heart of intentional communication. Before any word leaves your lips, you are called to run it through two crucial filters. Is it right and is it true? A statement might be factually accurate, but if speaking it serves no good purpose and only causes pain, is it the right thing to say? Conversely, a comforting lie might feel right in the moment, but it violates the duty to truth. The Stoic strives to speak only those things that pass both tests. They must be both true and beneficial. This eliminates gossip, idle chatter, harsh criticism that serves no constructive end, and empty promises made just to please. It forces a level of mindfulness that transforms casual conversation into a practice of moral integrity. We can see a stark contrast when we look at the communication styles that dominate our modern world versus the ideals of ancient Stoic orators. Today, we are drowning in a sea of words. We have 24-hour news cycles filled with speculation and opinion, social media feeds overflowing with hot takes and performative outrage, and business meetings that often prize the quantity of participation over the quality of contribution. This verbose environment values speed, volume, and constant engagement over measured, meaningful dialogue. It's communication as noise, designed to capture attention rather than to convey substance. Now compare that to the ideal of a Stoic orator like Cotto the Younger or even the later statesman Cincinnatus. Their speeches were not remembered for their length or their poetic flair, but for their weight and their impact. They understood that power diminishes with overuse. By speaking rarely and only when necessary, each intervention became an event. Their concise style was a weapon of clarity in a world of political deception, cutting through the noise to deliver a point with unmistakable force and purpose. Their words had gravity because they weren't squandered. This is a practice anyone can adopt starting today. I challenge you to a simple but powerful exercise. For the next 24 hours, make a conscious effort to eliminate just one unnecessary statement from your interactions. This isn't about becoming silent, but about becoming more surgical with your speech. Before you contribute to a conversation, pause and ask yourself the Oraline questions. Is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? You might find that urge to share a piece of office gossip suddenly vanishes. You might stop yourself from offering an unsolicited opinion that nobody asked for. You might decide that the complaint about the weather or the traffic is better left unsaid, saving your energy and everyone else's. That one withheld comment is more than just a deleted sentence. It's a reprieve from mental clutter, a small act of discipline that strengthens your self-control, and a step toward ensuring that when you do speak, people lean in to listen, knowing your words will be worth hearing. History's most respected leaders often led by example, not by volume. Their authority wasn't proclaimed through constant speech, but demonstrated through a powerful, composed presence that inspired confidence and commanded respect. This was the essence of leadership for figures like Marcus Aurelius, who understood that true influence begins not with the voice, but with the ears. His reign as Roman emperor, one of the most powerful positions in human history, was defined not by grand pronouncements but by a profound and disciplined practice of listening first. He surrounded himself with a council of trusted advisors, experts in law, military strategy, and philosophy, and his first instinct was never to dictate but to inquire. Before making monumental decisions that would affect millions of lives, whether to engage in a military campaign, how to distribute grain during a famine, or the best way to administer justice, he would methodically gather his advisors and listen. He absorbed their counsel, debated the merits of different viewpoints internally, and only then would he arrive at a judgment. This process wasn't a sign of indecisiveness. It was the ultimate expression of reasoned leadership. He recognized that his own perspective, however intelligent, was limited. By intentionally creating space for the expertise of others, he made wiser, more virtuous choices for the empire, embodying the Stoic ideal that the best leader is often the best listener. We get an intimate look at this practice through his personal journal, known to us as Meditations. It is filled with reminders to himself about the necessity of self-restraint, not just in action, but particularly in speech and judgment. He writes, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control." This is the philosophical bedrock of his leadership style. The option of having no opinion is that vital space of silence. It is the conscious choice to withhold immediate judgment, to resist the ego's urge to have an instant take on every situation. For a man who could have demanded instant obedience and unquestioned authority, this humility was staggering. He practiced this restraint daily, treating his own initial impressions not as commands, but as suggestions to be examined. He understood that reacting to every provocation or piece of news was a drain on his spirit and a distraction from his duty. By mastering his internal reactions, he maintained the clarity necessary to lead an entire empire through constant wars and political turmoil without being consumed by them. His journal was his tool for sharpening this discipline, a constant rehearsal for the performance of leadership. This stands in such sharp contrast to many modern conceptions of power. We often celebrate the leader who is always the loudest and most decisive in the room, the one who speaks with unshakable certainty on every topic. But history shows us that this style often leads to isolation, error, and eventual downfall. The leader who believes they have nothing left to learn quickly becomes surrounded by yes men and sycophants, cutting themselves off from the harsh truths and creative solutions they need to hear. Marcus Aurelius provides a timeless antidote to this. His power was magnified, not diminished, by his willingness to listen. His silence in council meetings was not a vacuum but a gravitational force, pulling the best ideas from those around him. People were loyal to him not out of fear, but out of genuine respect because they knew their contributions were valued and their voices were heard. He led from a place of quiet confidence that inspired the same in others, creating a stable and effective government even in the most unstable of times. This lesson from the past is incredibly applicable to anyone in a position of influence today, whether you're managing a team, teaching a classroom, or raising a family. The impulse to have all the answers immediately is strong, but the Stoic model offers a more powerful path. I encourage you to choose one historical Stoic leader, be it Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, or even a later figure like Frederick the Great who was influenced by these ideas, and spend a little time studying their habits. Read a few pages of meditations or look into how they conducted their daily routines. Then, select just one of their practices to apply in your own life this week. It might be committing to listening to every person in a meeting before you offer your own view. It could be writing down your initial reactions to a problem in a journal before you act on them, just as Marcus did. Or perhaps it's simply asking more questions and making fewer statements. The goal isn't to perfectly emulate an ancient Roman emperor, but to integrate a sliver of that Stoic discipline into your modern life, discovering for yourself how the power of listening first can transform your ability to lead. In uncertain times, Stoic leaders don't rush to answers they observe. They understand that ambiguity and the unknown are not voids to be filled with anxious chatter or hurried guesses, but spaces to be navigated with calm, watchful patience. The instinctive human response to uncertainty is often to seek immediate clarity, to demand quick solutions, or to fill the silence with speculation in an attempt to soothe our own discomfort. But this rush to speak and act from a place of fear often amplifies the chaos, creating more problems than it solves. The Stoic alternative is to embrace a state of equanimity, a steady, balanced mind that remains unshaken by the turbulence of the unknown. This isn't about being passive or indifferent. It's about actively choosing to gather information, to process, and to understand before committing to a course of action or speech. In doing so, a leader provides a stabilizing force, a calm center around which others can orient themselves when everything else feels unstable. Seneca, who witnessed immense political and personal turmoil during his life, wrote extensively on this very idea. He advised, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient, for he that is so wants nothing." While this speaks to a broader Stoic contentment, its application to uncertainty is profound. Seneca isn't suggesting we ignore the future, but rather that we should not be enslaved by our fears of it. The leader who remains silent in a crisis is practicing this form of freedom. They are not amusing themselves or their followers with baseless hopes or catastrophic fears. They are resting satisfied for the moment with the information they have and using the silence to gather more. This steady patience communicates that the situation is being handled with reason, not panic, and that the leader is in control of their own reactions, even if they cannot yet control external events. We can find a powerful modern example of this in the handling of a major airline crisis. Imagine a scenario where a commercial flight experiences a severe technical failure mid-air, forcing an emergency landing. The passengers are terrified, the cabin is filled with anxiety, and the natural impulse for someone in charge might be to immediately get on the intercom and offer reassurances, to say something to fill that terrifying silence. But what if the facts are still unclear? What if the initial reassurance turns out to be wrong? A leader trained in Stoic equanimity would understand the immense power of measured silence. The head flight attendant, for instance, might first ensure the crew is executing the safety protocols with calm precision. They would observe the situation, gather accurate information from the cockpit, and assess the emotional state of the cabin. Instead of making a premature announcement that could later prove incorrect and destroy trust, they might use their silent, composed presence and deliberate actions to project control. When they finally do speak, their voice is calm, their instructions are clear and factual, and their demeanor, honed in that period of silent observation, has already done more to prevent widespread panic than any rushed, placating words ever could. Their silence wasn't an absence of leadership, it was the very essence of it. Now turn this lens on your own life. How do you typically handle moments of personal or professional uncertainty? When a project at work takes an unexpected turn, or a personal relationship hits a rough patch with an unclear outcome, what is your default setting? Is it to immediately call a meeting and start brainstorming wildly, filling the air with potential solutions before you truly understand the problem? Is it to vent your anxieties to friends or colleagues, seeking reassurance but potentially spreading unease? Or is it to retreat into frantic research, trying to consume every possible piece of information to force certainty onto a situation that simply isn't ready to provide it? All of these are forms of rushing to fill the silence that uncertainty creates. This week, when you inevitably face a moment of ambiguity, whether large or small, I invite you to try a different approach. Before you speak, before you act, before you even think you need to have an answer, grant yourself the gift of 5 minutes of pure, silent observation. Don't try to solve anything, just sit with the uncertainty. Observe the facts as they are, not as you fear they might become. Notice the physical sensations of anxiety without letting them dictate your next move. See if this small act of Stoic patience doesn't provide a clearer, calmer path forward than your initial impulse ever could. Patience isn't passive, it's a powerful tool for effective leadership. In the realm of conversation and decision-making, patience is an active, strategic choice, a form of emotional and intellectual discipline that allows space for understanding to grow and trust to solidify. It's the conscious decision to resist the urge to immediately fill silence or dominate a discussion, creating room for other voices and perspectives to emerge. This approach transforms dialogue from a transactional exchange of opinions into a collaborative exploration of ideas, where the goal shifts from winning an argument to discovering the best possible outcome. By practicing patience, a leader signals that they value the contributions of others, which in turn fosters an environment of mutual respect and psychological safety. People feel heard and considered, which builds loyalty and encourages more open, honest communication in the future. This virtuous cycle, where patience breeds trust which then enables even deeper collaboration, is a cornerstone of sustainable and respected leadership. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who focused intensely on the practical application of philosophy in daily life, highlighted the critical importance of this virtue, particularly in how we communicate. He offered this guidance: no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. This beautiful analogy applies perfectly to the art of dialogue. You cannot force a fruitful conversation any more than you can force a fig to ripen prematurely. It requires time and the right conditions. Epictetus is reminding us that impactful communication, like meaningful change, has its own natural rhythm and timing. Rushing to speak, interrupting, or demanding immediate answers disrupts this rhythm. The patient leader, like a wise gardener, understands that you must first create the conditions for growth through listening, through silence, through allowing ideas to blossom and mature, before you can hope to harvest the best results. We can see the profound effect of this principle in high-stakes diplomatic negotiations, where impatience can lead to international incidents and patient restraint can forge lasting peace. Consider the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel in the late 1970s. The negotiations were fraught with decades of deep-seated animosity, cultural misunderstanding, and personal pride. President Jimmy Carter, acting as the mediator, famously employed immense patience as his primary tool. There were moments of deadlock where both sides would storm out of the room, and the instinct might have been to chase after them, to pressure them, to force a resolution. But Carter understood the Stoic value of timing. He often allowed for long, uncomfortable silences. He gave the leaders Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat the space to vent their frustrations privately before reconvening. He listened for hours to their historical grievances without immediately countering with solutions. This patience wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a strategic display of strength and respect. By not rushing the process, by allowing the figurative figs to ripen, he enabled both parties to move beyond their initial reactive positions and arrive at a historic agreement that seemed impossible at the outset. The breakthrough came not from a brilliant, hastily delivered argument, but from the cumulative power of patient, persistent, and respectful dialogue. This kind of transformative patience is a skill that can be practiced and honed in our everyday interactions, and it starts with something remarkably simple. I invite you to try a small but powerful experiment in your very next conversation. Make a conscious decision to wait just 3 seconds longer than you normally would before you respond after someone has finished speaking. Those 3 seconds of intentional silence will feel surprisingly long at first, and your mind might scream at you to jump in. But in that brief pause, several important things happen. First, you ensure the other person has truly finished their thought, preventing you from unintentionally cutting them off. Second, you give yourself a moment to actually process what they said, rather than just reacting to the last few words you heard. And third, you communicate non-verbally that you are considering their words carefully, which makes them feel valued and respected. You might find that this tiny window of patience completely changes the tone of the discussion, leading to deeper understanding and more meaningful connections, one conversation at a time. Stoicism teaches that many regrets stem from words spoken in haste. This is more than just a philosophical observation. It's a practical truth that echoes through our personal and professional lives. When we speak without restraint, we often unleash a cascade of unintended consequences, misunderstandings that fracture trust, harsh criticisms that wound relationships, and promises made in the heat of the moment that we cannot possibly keep. Each of these impulsive utterances chips away at our personal integrity, the bedrock of our character that Stoicism holds so dear. Restraint, therefore, is not about suppression. It is an active form of protection. It safeguards our connections with others by preventing needless damage, and it preserves our own self-respect by ensuring our actions align with our values. It is the practice of treating our words with the same care we would afford a precious object, knowing that once released, they can never be taken back. Seneca, in his moral letters to Lucilius, delves deeply into the destructive power of unchecked speech. He writes, "A word once let loose cannot be recalled." With this simple, stark statement, he captures the irreversible nature of communication. You can apologize for a harsh word, but you cannot erase the memory of it from the mind of the person you hurt. You can try to clarify a thoughtless comment, but you cannot undo the misunderstanding it has already created. Seneca saw speech as a powerful force that required diligent governance, much like steering a ship through treacherous waters. He advised pausing to consider the weight and potential impact of our words before we give them voice, arguing that this moment of hesitation is the difference between a life filled with the regret of hasty actions and one guided by thoughtful, virtuous choice. For the Stoic, every conversation is an opportunity to practice this discipline, to choose integrity over impulse. Consider a historical moment where the sheer weight of a single word could have altered the course of events. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, President John F. Kennedy and his executive committee were locked in tense deliberations on how to respond to the Soviet Union placing nuclear missiles just 90 miles from the United States. The pressure for immediate, aggressive military action was immense. Many advisors advocated for a swift airstrike. However, Kennedy, demonstrating remarkable Stoic restraint, chose a different path. He insisted on a measured response, beginning with a naval blockade he termed a quarantine, a carefully chosen word that was less overtly hostile than other alternatives. This strategic pause and his refusal to utter an ultimatum or a threat in those first critical days created the essential space for diplomacy. It allowed for back-channel communications to flourish and ultimately provided Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev a way to de-escalate without losing face. A single inflammatory statement, a rushed decision to speak and act, could have plunged the world into nuclear war. Instead, restraint, the discipline of measured words and calculated action, prevented a global catastrophe and stands as a profound example of how silence can be the ultimate tool of preservation. Now, bring this principle closer to home. I want you to think back over the last week or even the last few days. Can you recall a specific instance where you said something you almost immediately wished you could take back? Perhaps it was a sarcastic remark meant as a joke that landed with a sting, and you saw the flicker of hurt in a friend's eyes. Maybe it was an angry text message sent in a moment of frustration that escalated a minor disagreement into a major argument. Or it could have been a piece of gossip you casually shared, only to later realize it betrayed a confidence or misrepresented someone's character. Sit with that memory for just a moment. Remember the feeling of regret that followed. Now replay that same scenario in your mind, but this time imagine you had exercised Stoic restraint. Imagine you had taken that crucial pause Seneca recommends. What if you had simply bitten your tongue, taken a deep breath, or waited 30 minutes before responding? How might the outcome have been different? Would a relationship be stronger? Would you feel a greater sense of inner peace and alignment with your own values? This exercise isn't about dwelling on past mistakes, but about learning from them. By clearly seeing the link between our unrestrained speech and our subsequent regret, we plant the seed for more mindful, intentional, and ultimately regret-free communication in the future. True authority comes not from dominating conversation, but from composed presence. It's a quiet force that radiates from a center of unshakable calm, influencing others not through the volume of one's voice, but through the depth of one's poise. This is the essence of Stoic composure, a state of inner equilibrium that remains steadfast even when external circumstances are in turmoil. When a leader cultivates this quality, They project a confidence that is both genuine and magnetic, drawing people in not because they are demanding attention, but because their serene self-assurance naturally commands it. This form of influence is far more potent than any command issued from a place of anxiety or aggression. It works subtly, persuading others through the powerful, silent language of emotional stability and self-control. Marcus Aurelius, constantly navigating the chaos of war, political intrigue, and personal loss, wrote extensively about this inner fortress of calm. He reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This realization is the bedrock of composure. It is the understanding that while we cannot control the events that unfold around us, we retain absolute sovereignty over our internal world, our judgments, our reactions, and our emotional responses. A leader who has internalized this principle does not get swept up in the panic of a crisis or the excitement of a momentary victory. They remain anchored, their silence a testament to their focus on what they can truly control. This isn't indifference, it is a profound focus on effective action, which begins with a mind that has refused to be disturbed into reactivity. Their authority stems from this visible mastery of self, which assures everyone else that the situation, however dire, is being handled by someone who is not themselves unraveling. Now picture two leaders walking into a high-pressure quarterly review where profits have unexpectedly plummeted. The first leader is loud and anxious. They immediately dominate the room, speaking rapidly, assigning blame, their voice tinged with panic and frustration. They demand immediate answers and solutions, their energy creating a ripple effect of anxiety throughout their team. People become defensive, ideas are stifled by fear, and the meeting devolves into a tense exchange of excuses and short-term fixes. This leader mistakes volume for control and activity for progress, but their lack of composure silently erodes their authority, revealing a fragility that their team cannot unsee. Now contrast this with the second leader. They enter the same tense room and simply observe for a moment. They take their seat calmly, make eye contact, and instead of speaking first, they listen. Their posture is relaxed yet attentive, their expression thoughtful rather than furious. When they do speak, their voice is measured and calm. They acknowledge the problem without drama and ask insightful questions to understand the root causes. Their serene presence acts as a balm on the team's collective anxiety. It signals that challenges are to be met with intellect and collaboration, not fear and blame. This leader's composure does not just manage the situation, it elevates their authority, inspiring confidence and encouraging thoughtful, rather than reactive, problem-solving from everyone present. This contrast reveals a fundamental truth about leadership presence. We often assume that to be seen as authoritative, we must be the most vocal person in the room. But true, lasting authority is granted, not taken. It is granted by others to those who demonstrate stability, wisdom, and self-mastery. A composed leader's silence is not a vacuum. It is a space filled with perceived competence and trust. People instinctively gravitate towards and place their confidence in those who remain steady under pressure, because that steadiness provides a psychological safe harbor in the storm. The loud, anxious leader broadcasts their internal chaos, while the serene one broadcasts their internal strength. The choice is clear about which one truly commands respect. I want you to take a moment to consider your own presence. Think about the various roles you play, whether you're leading a team at work, guiding your family at home, or simply navigating social situations. How does your composure, or lack thereof, shape the way people perceive your authority? In your next meeting or conversation, make a conscious choice to experiment with this principle. Rather than focusing on what you will say to establish your point, Focus first on cultivating a sense of inner calm. Sit with your back straight, breathe deeply, and listen more than you speak. Notice the urge to fill a silence or react to a provocation, and instead, choose to simply observe it without immediately engaging. See if this small shift in your demeanor doesn't fundamentally alter the dynamics of the interaction. You may find that by saying less and embodying more calm, you actually amplify your influence and project an authority that is both authentic and deeply respected. Stoic leaders dedicate time to silence and reflection each day because they understand that clarity doesn't emerge from constant noise. It is cultivated in the quiet spaces we intentionally create. This isn't about adding another item to a busy schedule. It's about recognizing that this daily practice is the very foundation that makes everything else more effective and intentional. Just as an athlete must warm up their muscles before a competition, a leader must warm up their mind with reflection to navigate the complexities of the day with wisdom rather than reactivity. This dedicated quiet time, whether through journaling, meditation, or simply sitting in thoughtful silence, acts as a filter for the mind. It allows the dust of daily distractions and emotional reactions to settle, providing a clear pool of calm from which your words and actions can then flow with purpose and precision. By starting or ending your day in reflection, you are essentially programming your default setting to be one of considered response, ensuring that your communication throughout the day is aligned with your deepest values and not your most superficial impulses. This idea of a daily review is beautifully illustrated by Seneca's evening practice. In his Moral Letters, he describes a powerful nightly ritual. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." This is the Stoic concept of introspection taken to its most practical level. Seneca wasn't just idly thinking about his day, he was conducting a rigorous, honest audit of his own character. He would confront his mistakes without mercy but without self-flagellation, seeking only the lesson within them. He would also acknowledge where he acted with virtue, reinforcing those positive patterns. This practice served as a feedback loop for his soul, a way to continuously refine his judgments and ensure that his future speech and actions would be more virtuous, more intentional, and less likely to cause the regret we so often discuss. He turned daily life itself into his classroom, and this quiet reflection was his daily homework. This ancient habit finds a powerful echo in the routines of many modern leaders who may not even call themselves Stoics. Take Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. Dalio is a fervent advocate of meditation, which he credits for providing him with the mental clarity and emotional equilibrium needed to make billion-dollar decisions in incredibly volatile markets. His practice of daily transcendental meditation is his version of Seneca's evening review, a dedicated period of silence that allows him to detach from the chaotic noise of the financial world, gain a clearer perspective on his own thought processes, and approach problems with a calm, focused mind. Similarly, countless executives, from Salesforce's Mark Benioff to Twitter's Jack Dorsey, have publicly credited daily meditation with enhancing their leadership, improving their listening skills, and helping them communicate with more intention and less ego. They have discovered what the Stoics knew, that a quiet mind is not an empty mind but a prepared one. The beauty of this practice is its profound accessibility. You don't need to be a Roman philosopher or a Fortune 500 CEO to benefit from it. You only need a few minutes and a willingness to be still. So I want to issue you a direct and simple challenge. For the next 7 days, I want you to incorporate just 5 minutes of silent reflection into your daily routine. It doesn't matter if you do it first thing in the morning with a cup of coffee or last thing at night before you go to sleep. You don't need any special equipment or apps. Just find a quiet spot, set a timer for 5 minutes, and simply be with your own thoughts. You might choose to reflect on a specific question like Seneca did. What did I do well today? Where could I have been better? Or you might just let your mind wander and observe where it goes without judgment. The goal isn't to achieve enlightenment in 5 minutes. The goal is to build the muscle of sitting with silence, of becoming comfortable in the quiet spaces where true clarity is born. You may be surprised to find that this small investment of time begins to pay dividends in every conversation you have, making you a more present, more intentional, and far wiser communicator. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This isn't just a modern communication tip. It's a profound Stoic approach to dialogue that redefines the entire purpose of conversation. Most of us enter discussions with a primary, often unconscious, goal: to broadcast our own perspective, to ensure our voice is heard, and to convince others of our point of view. We listen, but usually only as a pause to reload our own arguments. The Stoic flips this script entirely. They propose that the true virtue in communication lies not in self-expression, but in comprehension. By making understanding your foremost objective, you accomplish two transformative things simultaneously. You dramatically reduce the potential for conflict, as most disagreements stem from feeling misunderstood, and you build a deep, genuine empathy that transforms superficial exchanges into meaningful connections. This shift turns every conversation from a potential battlefield into a shared exploration, where the goal is collective discovery rather than individual victory. The philosopher Epictetus, who focused intensely on the practical application of philosophy in daily relationships, provided clear guidance on this very point. He advised, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But this goes far beyond a simple ratio of listening to talking. Epictetus is pointing to a fundamental reorientation of our attention. He continues in his discourses to emphasize the importance of seeing things from another's viewpoint, not as a tactic to win them over, but as a disciplined exercise in justice and empathy. He suggests that before we judge another person's actions or dismiss their words, we must make a sincere effort to step into their circumstances and understand the impressions and judgments that led them to their conclusion. This act of cognitive empathy is a form of moral rigor. It's the hard work of suspending our own ego to fully appreciate the reality of someone else. For the Stoic, this isn't about being nice, it's about being accurate and just in our assessments of the world and the people in it. Consider a common team dynamic in a modern workplace. A project deadline is missed and the manager calls a meeting. The immediate default reaction is often a round of finger-pointing. The design team blames the engineering team for unrealistic timelines. Engineering points to the marketing team for changing requirements at the last minute. Marketing complains that the sales team made promises without consulting them. This cycle of defensive speaking, where everyone is trying to be understood but no one is trying to understand, creates a toxic atmosphere of blame and resentment. The project remains stalled and trust is eroded. Now imagine the same scenario guided by the Stoic principle. The manager begins not by asking, "Whose fault is this?" but by saying, "Let's each explain our part in this process and the challenges we faced, and for each person speaking, the rest of us will only ask questions to understand their perspective fully." This simple rule changes everything. As the designer explains the creative constraints, the engineer begins to understand the delays. As the marketer outlines the pressure from competitors, the salesperson sees the reason for the changes. By the time everyone has spoken, the team has a holistic picture of the failure. They are no longer opponents defending their turf. They are collaborators who have diagnosed a systemic problem together. The solution they then build will be stronger because it's built on a foundation of mutual understanding, not a fragile truce between warring factions. This week, I want to offer you a clear and actionable challenge. For the next several days, make a conscious decision to enter every significant conversation with one primary goal, and one goal only: to understand the other person's perspective as completely as you can. Before you meet with your partner to discuss finances, before you sit down with your employee for a performance review, before you debate a topic with a friend, set a silent intention for yourself. Your job is not to be right. Your job is not to convince. Your job is to comprehend. Approach the discussion with genuine curiosity, as if you are an anthropologist studying a fascinating new culture. Ask open-ended questions. Paraphrase what they say to ensure you've got it right. Notice the urge to interrupt with your own story or opinion, and consciously set it aside. You will be amazed at how this single shift changes the emotional temperature of your interactions. People will feel respected and valued, and in that environment of psychological safety, they will become more open to hearing your perspective in return. You may just find that the best way to finally be understood is to stop trying so hard to be heard, and to start listening with the full force of your attention. Stoic leaders measure their words, ensuring each serves a purpose. This principle of selective speech is not about being silent all the time, but about treating our words as a precious and finite resource, to be spent only when they can contribute something of genuine value, whether that's truth, kindness, clarity, or constructive action. Every unnecessary word we utter is not just a waste of breath. It's a dilution of our influence and a potential source of misunderstanding or harm. When we speak sparingly and with clear intention, our communication becomes like a sharp, well-honed tool, precise, effective, and capable of cutting through noise to reach the heart of the matter. This disciplined approach commands a different kind of respect than voluble speech ever could. It signals a mind that is in control, a person who thinks before they speak, and a leader whose words, precisely because they are rare, carry immense weight and are met with attentive silence by others. This idea finds its roots in the very beginnings of Stoic thought. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, famously advocated for what he called frugal speech. He understood that wisdom and true strength were not demonstrated by eloquence alone, but by the ability to restrain the impulse to speak on every topic. Similarly, the Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus took this even further, directly linking the discipline of our speech to the integrity of our character. He argued that just as a wise person is careful with their money, they should be even more careful with their words, guarding against speaking too much or too soon. For these philosophers, the quantity of one's speech was inversely proportional to its quality and impact. They saw verbose, unchecked talking as a sign of a disordered mind, one that was leaking energy and focus. Frugal speech, in contrast, was the mark of a disciplined intellect and a virtuous character, someone who had mastered their internal impulses and could therefore be trusted with leadership. We can see this contrast play out vividly when we examine different leadership styles, even in the modern era. Consider a corporate executive who dominates every meeting, speaking at length to reiterate points, micromanage details, and ensure their voice is the loudest in the room. Their team may comply out of obligation, but over time, this excessive speech breeds fatigue, resentment, and a culture where employees stop offering ideas because they feel they won't be heard. The leader's words become background noise, their important messages lost in a sea of verbal clutter. Now, contrast this with a leader like the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was renowned for her powerful brevity. She was a meticulous editor of her own words, both in writing and in conversation. During Supreme Court arguments, she was known for her long, strategic silences, listening intently to every argument. When she did speak, her questions were famously incisive, concise, and devastatingly precise, often unraveling a weak legal argument with a single, perfectly crafted sentence. Her influence was monumental not in spite of her frugal speech, but because of it. Each word was chosen, each question was purposeful, and as a result, the entire legal community leaned in to listen whenever she chose to break her silence. This practice invites a deeply personal and practical reflection. I want you to take a mental walk through your conversations over the last 24 hours. From the moment you woke up to the interactions you had at work or at home, replay them in your mind. How many of the words you spoke were truly necessary? How many were spoken out of habit, nervousness, a desire to fill an awkward silence, or simply to hear the sound of your own voice? Can you identify even one comment, one piece of gossip, one unsolicited opinion, or one reflexive complaint that, upon reflection, added no real value to the conversation or to the people involved? This isn't an exercise in self-criticism, but in mindful awareness. The goal is not to become a person of few words, but a person of meaningful words. By conducting this simple audit, you begin to shine a light on the automaticity of your speech patterns. You start to notice the gap between an impulse to speak and the action itself, and in that gap you find the freedom to choose. You discover that the most powerful way to enhance your influence and deepen the respect others have for you is not to talk more, but to talk better, to ensure that when you do decide to speak, your words are worth listening to. Emotional balance is a Stoic superpower, and silence is its most reliable ally in achieving it. This isn't about suppressing what you feel, but about creating a crucial buffer between the initial spark of an emotion and the words you choose to give it. Think of it as building a mental airlock. When a wave of anger, frustration, or anxiety hits, silence provides that sealed chamber where the emotion can be examined and processed before it's allowed to flood into your conversation and potentially cause damage. This practice of pausing is a direct defense against what psychologists call emotional hijacking, that moment when your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, overrides your prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, leading you to say things you almost instantly regret. Stoicism provides the tools to reinforce that airlock, using reason as the control panel to manage the pressure. Marcus Aurelius, who faced relentless political and military pressures, constantly drilled this idea in his private writings. He advised himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." But he went even further, offering a specific technique for that moment of emotional trigger. The first step is to not be carried away by the impression. Say to it, "Hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test." This is the essence of the Stoic pause. He isn't saying ignore the feeling. He's instructing himself to literally greet the emotional impression like a stranger at the door, to not immediately let it in, but to first ask it some questions. Is this anger justified? Is this anxiety based on a fact or a fear? This momentary silence, this space for questioning, is how we master our emotions through reason, rather than letting them master us. Imagine a high-pressure board meeting where a promising project has just failed spectacularly, costing the company a significant amount of money. The CEO, feeling a surge of disappointment and under pressure from shareholders, has every reason to react emotionally. The initial impulse might be to immediately demand answers, to single out the project lead for public criticism. to fill the tense silence with loud, anxious questions that are really just expressions of blame. This reaction would be understandable, but it would also be destructive, triggering defensiveness and fear throughout the team, stifling any honest analysis and ensuring that the same mistakes might be repeated because people are too afraid to speak up. Now envision the alternative. The CEO receives the news, feels that same surge of frustration, but instead of speaking, she chooses silence. She lets the report sit on the table for a long moment, making deliberate eye contact with each person in the room. Her calm, silent presence acknowledges the gravity of the situation without amplifying the panic. She takes a slow breath, allowing her initial emotional reaction to subside and her rational mind to engage. When she finally speaks, her voice is measured. She says, "This is a significant setback. Let's take the next hour to understand the root causes, not assign blame. I want to hear from each of you on what we can learn from this." Her silence didn't ignore the problem. It transformed the environment for solving it. It escalated the tension, modeled composure, and set the stage for a productive rather than a punitive conversation. This week, I want you to become an observer of your own internal weather patterns. Make it a personal mission to simply notice those specific moments when a strong emotion creates a powerful urge in you to speak immediately. It might be that flash of irritation when a colleague interrupts you, or the defensive heat that rises when you receive constructive feedback, or even the impulsive excitement that makes you want to share a secret you promised to keep. Don't judge the feeling and don't feel you have to stop it immediately. Just practice noticing the physical sensation, the clenched jaw, the quickened heartbeat, the warmth in your face, and mentally label it, there is anger, or this is anxiety. That simple act of observation, of creating that Marcus Aurelius-style moment between the impression and your assent to it, is the practice. It's in that tiny, silent gap that your emotional balance is built, one pause at a time. Stoicism values embodying virtues over preaching them. This is the core of what it means to lead by example, a principle that shifts the focus from what we say to who we are and how we act in the world. It's the understanding that the most powerful lessons are not delivered through lectures or instructions, but are transmitted silently through the integrity of our character and the consistency of our actions. A leader who lives their philosophy becomes a living testament to its value, inspiring others not through coercion or persuasion, but through the magnetic pull of authentic example. This form of influence is far more durable and profound than any speech could ever be, because it bypasses the skepticism of the intellect and speaks directly to the heart. People may doubt your words, but they find it much harder to doubt a life well lived. When your behavior aligns perfectly with your stated values, you create a resonance that words alone can never achieve, building a foundation of trust that is unshakable. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, who began his life in slavery and understood the difference between empty words and genuine power, placed immense emphasis on this very idea. He famously said, "If you didn't learn these things in order to demonstrate them in practice, what did you learn them for?" For Epictetus, philosophy was not an abstract intellectual exercise to be debated in classrooms. It was a practical, lived discipline. He challenged his students to stop talking about virtue and start enacting it. He warned against the hypocrisy of knowing what is right but failing to do it, arguing that such a disconnect makes our words meaningless. True wisdom, in the Stoic view, is performative. It is demonstrated in our patience during a frustrating delay, our courage in the face of a personal fear, our justice in a small disagreement, and our self-control when tempted to gossip. This is how philosophy moves from the page and becomes a tangible force in the world through the silent, consistent actions of those who practice it. We can see a timeless example of this principle in the life and leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. While not a Stoic in the traditional sense, he perfectly embodied the Stoic ideal of leading through embodied action. Gandhi's philosophy of non-violent resistance, or satyagraha, was not something he merely wrote about or lectured on. He lived it utterly and completely. He didn't just ask his followers to make sacrifices, he made them himself, from spinning his own cloth to undermine British economic control to undertaking prolonged fasts to protest violence. His quiet integrity, his extreme self-discipline, and his willingness to endure personal suffering for his beliefs were his most powerful speeches. He understood that to inspire a nation to adopt a radical and difficult path of non-violence, he first had to walk that path himself with unwavering commitment. His actions were so potent, so aligned with his message, that they motivated millions to follow him not because he commanded it, but because his example made them believe it was possible. His life was his lecture, and its impact reshaped history. This week, I invite you to experiment with this profound form of silent leadership in your own sphere of influence. Instead of telling someone what they should do or explaining a principle you believe in, choose one specific virtue, perhaps patience, kindness, or integrity, and make a conscious commitment to demonstrate it through your actions alone. If you want to teach patience, consciously decide not to honk your horn in traffic or sigh impatiently in a long line. If you want to promote kindness, perform a small, anonymous act of generosity without any need for recognition. If you value integrity, choose to tell the truth in a situation where a little white lie would be easier. Don't announce what you're doing, simply do it. Observe how this shift from verbal instruction to silent embodiment changes your own relationship to the virtue, and notice the subtle, often unspoken, impact it has on those around you. You may discover that your most powerful lessons are taught without you ever saying a single word. In Stoicism, timing is everything, especially in communication. It's the disciplined recognition that a brilliant point delivered at the wrong moment becomes a useless one, or worse, a destructive one. This goes far beyond simply waiting for a pause in the conversation. It's about cultivating a sensitive awareness of the emotional, psychological, and situational context, and then aligning your speech with that context for maximum virtue and effect. A Stoic understands that the value of their words is not inherent. It is conferred by the readiness of the listener to receive them. Patience in speech, therefore, isn't a passive delay, it's an active process of calibration, ensuring that your contribution lands with the impact you intend, fostering understanding rather than confusion, and building bridges instead of burning them. Seneca, who served as an advisor to the often volatile Emperor Nero, wrote extensively on this delicate art. He observed, "There is a time for many words, and there is also a time for sleep." This seemingly simple statement carries a profound weight. Seneca isn't just advocating for silence, he is highlighting the natural rhythm of all things, including human interaction. There is a season for expansive dialogue and a season for restful quiet. A skilled communicator, like a skilled farmer, knows better than to sow seeds in frozen ground. They understand that forcing a conversation when the other person is tired, emotionally charged, or simply not ready to listen is an exercise in futility. It wastes your energy and often hardens the other person against your message. The art lies in discerning the fertile moment when the mind is open, the heart is receptive, and the conditions are right for your words to take root and grow. Consider a high-stakes business negotiation where two companies are trying to form a crucial partnership. The discussion has reached a critical impasse over the valuation of intellectual property. The lead negotiator for one side feels intense pressure to justify their high asking price. the initial impulse might be to launch into a detailed, day-to-heavy monologue the moment the other side voices skepticism, to overpower their objections with volume and velocity. This is speaking from anxiety, a need to control, but a negotiator versed in Stoic principles would do the opposite. They would let the skepticism hang in the air. They would absorb the objection calmly and then, instead of responding immediately, might say, "That's a significant concern. Let's take a short break and reconvene in 15 minutes." That pause is strategic timing. It allows the emotional temperature in the room to cool. It gives the other party time to sit with their own position and perhaps even question its rigidity. It allows the negotiator to refine their approach. When everyone returns, the negotiator doesn't lead with more numbers. Instead, they ask a question. "Help me understand what an ideal outcome on this point looks like from your perspective." This shift in timing and approach from immediate defense to patient inquiry completely transforms the dynamic. It moves the conversation from a head-to-head conflict to a side-by-side problem-solving session. The well-timed pause and the carefully chosen question, delivered at the right moment, do more to advance the deal than any frantic, immediate rebuttal ever could. This principle of timing applies just as powerfully to our personal lives. Think back to a recent conversation where your message completely missed the mark. Was the content itself wrong, or was it the timing that doomed it? Perhaps you tried to offer constructive criticism to a partner the moment they walked in the door after a draining day at work. Your points may have been valid and even helpful, but delivered into the context of their exhaustion and low capacity, they were received as an attack, triggering defensiveness instead of reflection. Maybe you chose a celebratory family gathering to voice a long-held grievance, mistaking the presence of an audience for the right moment for confrontation, and inadvertently turned a joyful occasion into an awkward and painful one. We've all experienced how poor timing can make even the most well-intentioned words land with a painful thud, creating rifts that the content of the message alone didn't warrant. The Stoic remedy is to actively consider the ecosystem of the conversation before we contribute to it. It's asking ourselves not just what to say, but when it will best serve understanding and virtue. Trust is earned not by speaking, but by truly hearing others. This might sound counterintuitive in a world that often equates leadership with having all the answers, but the Stoics understood a profound truth. The deepest bonds of loyalty and confidence are forged not in the fire of our eloquence, but in the quiet, receptive space of our attention. When we practice attentive silence, we are doing far more than just gathering information. We are performing a fundamental act of respect. We are signaling to another person that their thoughts, their experiences, and their perspective matter enough to warrant our full and uninterrupted focus. This act of validation is the bedrock of psychological safety, creating an environment where people feel seen, understood, and valued for their contributions, not just their compliance. In such an environment, trust flourishes naturally because it is based on the reliable certainty that the leader is not just present, but profoundly present for them. Marcus Aurelius, despite the immense weight of imperial command, constantly reminded himself of the critical importance of looking beyond his own needs to understand those of the people he led. In his Meditations, he wrote, "Men exist for the sake of one another. Teach them then or bear with them." This simple, powerful statement encapsulates the dual duty of a leader: to instruct when necessary, but first and always to bear with, to endure, to tolerate, to listen to, and to understand. He is advocating for a leadership of empathy, where the first step is not to impose your will but to comprehend the will and the needs of others. For Aurelius, this wasn't a soft skill. It was a core component of justice and his duty to the common good. A leader who fails to listen fails to understand the reality of the situation and the people within it, and therefore cannot possibly make wise, virtuous decisions that serve the whole. His ability to command trust was directly linked to his demonstrated commitment to first seek understanding. We can see this principle come to life in a modern corporate setting. Imagine a software development team that has been consistently missing its sprint deadlines. Morale is low, and the project manager is under pressure from upper management to fix the problem. A manager operating from a place of anxiety might call a meeting and immediately begin dictating new, stricter protocols, micromanaging tasks, and speaking at the team about accountability. This approach, driven by the need to be seen as doing something, would likely breed resentment, defensiveness, and further disengagement. The team's trust in their manager would erode because they feel treated like cogs in a machine, not partners in a solution. Now envision a different manager. She calls the same meeting, but she begins not by speaking, but by listening. She says, "I know we're all frustrated about these delays. I want to understand what's happening from your perspective. What are the biggest obstacles you're facing in your workflow?" And then she does the hardest thing. She sits in silence, making eye contact, and waits. She listens as a junior developer timidly mentions that the constant urgent requests from the marketing team are disrupting their focus. A senior engineer adds that the current deployment process is cumbersome and eats up hours of time. A designer confesses that the feedback loop is unclear, leading to repeated revisions. By listening attentively and without interruption, the manager isn't just collecting data, she is building trust. Each team member feels heard. Their lived experience is acknowledged as valid. When she finally speaks, her solutions are not arbitrary dictates, but informed responses to the real problems they just identified. She has earned the trust to lead because she first demonstrated the humility to listen. This dynamic extends far beyond the office and into every relationship we have. Trust is the currency of all human connection, and we mint it not with our mouths but with our ears. I want you to take a brief moment to turn this lens on your own life. Look at the landscape of your personal and professional relationships. Is there one connection that feels strained, distant, or simply stuck in superficial patterns? It might be with a colleague you sometimes clash with, a teenage child who seems increasingly withdrawn, or a partner with whom conversations have become more transactional than meaningful. Now ask yourself this: when was the last time you engaged with that person with the sole intention of understanding their world, without any agenda to advise, correct, or share your own view? The very act of identifying this relationship is the first step. The next step is to consciously create an opportunity for attentive listening. Schedule a coffee, put your phone away, and ask open-ended questions about their experience. Your only goal is to understand. You may find that the simple, silent act of hearing them out does more to build a bridge of trust than any argument you could have won or any advice you could have given. Stoic leaders seek solitude to gain perspective before engaging because they understand that the most complex challenges are rarely solved in the midst of a crowd. In a world that celebrates constant connectivity and non-stop collaboration, the idea of withdrawing can seem counterintuitive, even antisocial. But the Stoics saw it differently. They recognized solitude not as loneliness or isolation, but as a strategic retreat, a necessary space to step back from the overwhelming noise of opinions, expectations, and immediate reactions. It is in this quietude that the mental clutter settles, allowing for a clarity of thought that is simply impossible to achieve when we are constantly reacting to external stimuli. This practice of intentional withdrawal is like allowing muddy water to become still. Only then can you see clearly to the bottom. discerning what is truly important from what is merely urgent or distracting. Seneca, in his moral letters, championed this practice of periodic withdrawal as essential for mental and spiritual renewal. He advised his friend Lucilius, "You must give your mind time to withdraw into itself and rest. When you allow it distraction in the form of peace and quiet, it becomes stronger and more capable of grasping the most challenging problems." Notice that Seneca doesn't frame solitude as idleness or escape. He frames it as active rest, a form of mental training that increases our capacity for focused work. For Seneca, this wasn't a luxury for the elite. It was a fundamental discipline for anyone who wished to maintain their equanimity and judgment amidst life's inevitable turmoil. He believed that by regularly stepping away from the crowd, we replenish our inner resources, returning to our duties not drained, but recharged and realigned with our core principles. This cyclical rhythm of engagement and withdrawal is what prevents burnout and ensures that our contributions are thoughtful rather than merely reactive. History is filled with leaders who instinctively understood this Stoic principle, harnessing the power of solitude to make monumental decisions. Take President Abraham Lincoln during the darkest days of the American Civil War. He was known to frequently retreat to the telegraph office of the War Department, not just to send messages, but to find a few moments of quiet away from the endless parade of advisors, petitioners, and politicians demanding his attention in the White House. It was in those brief respites, surrounded by the quiet hum of machinery, that he could think deeply, read reports without interruption, and compose his thoughts. His famed Gettysburg Address, a masterpiece of concision and profound meaning, was not the product of a committee meeting but of deep, solitary reflection on the principles for which the war was being fought. Similarly, in the modern era, figures like Bill Gates are famous for their think weeks, dedicated periods where they would withdraw from their companies to read and reflect on future strategies in complete isolation. These leaders didn't see solitude as shirking responsibility. They recognized it as the highest form of fulfilling it, because it ensured their most important decisions were made from a place of clarity, not chaos. The constant pings of notifications, the pressure to be always available, and the endless scroll of information have created a culture of collective distraction that makes this Stoic practice more vital than ever. Our attention is fractured into 1,000 tiny pieces, making deep, sustained thought a rare commodity. This isn't just an inconvenience, it actively degrades the quality of our decisions. When we never create space for solitude, we default to making choices based on the most recent input, the loudest voice, or the most pressing anxiety, rather than on our deepest values and long-term goals. We become reactors, not leaders of our own lives. Carving out quiet time is therefore an act of rebellion against this culture of noise, a deliberate choice to reclaim your cognitive sovereignty and ensure that your actions are intentional, not impulsive. I want to challenge you to reclaim a small piece of this clarity for yourself. You don't need a week in a secluded cabin to start. You can begin with just 10 minutes. This week, find one pocket of time to be completely alone with your thoughts, free from any digital distractions. It could be a 10-minute walk without your phone or headphones, sitting in your car in silence before walking into your home, or waking up just a little earlier to sip your coffee in the quiet of the morning. During this time, don't try to force any grand insights or solve your biggest problems. Simply allow your mind to wander. Observe the thoughts that arise without judgment. You might be surprised at what surfaces when you finally stop filling every available second with noise. This small daily investment in solitude is not time wasted. It is the essential groundwork for the clarity, focus, and purposeful action that define a truly effective and resilient life. Not every battle requires words. Sometimes silence is the best response. This Stoic principle isn't about surrendering or admitting defeat. It's about exercising supreme discernment to recognize which conflicts are worth your energy and which are merely traps for your peace of mind. The world is filled with potential provocations: the rude comment from a stranger, the dismissive email from a colleague, the political bait from a relative at a family gathering. Our ego, ever vigilant and fiercely protective, urges us to engage, to defend, to prove our point. But Stoicism asks a more profound question: what do you truly gain by winning this particular skirmish? Often the victory is hollow, costing you your composure and dragging you into a pointless battle that leaves both parties wounded and the core issue unresolved. Choosing silence in these moments is an act of strategic preservation, a way to protect your inner harmony and conserve your energy for the fights that truly matter, those that align with your core values and principles. Epictetus, who understood the draining nature of unnecessary conflict better than most, provided timeless guidance on this very point. He taught, if someone tries to insult you and you become angry, you have let their words become your master. This is a revolutionary way to view provocation. Epictetus reframes the entire dynamic. The insult itself is nothing, just a combination of sounds or letters. It only gains power, it only becomes your master, if you grant it that power through your reaction. He advises us to treat such provocations as we would treat a barking dog on the street. You don't stop to argue with the dog, to reason with it, or to bark back. You simply recognize the noise for what it is, meaningless, and you continue calmly on your path. By refusing to engage, you are not ignoring the problem. You are demonstrating that you do not accept it as your problem to solve. Your silence becomes a shield that deflects the arrow of insult, leaving it to fall harmlessly to the ground, never having touched you. We can find a powerful historical example of this in the life of Abraham Lincoln, whose leadership was deeply influenced by Stoic principles. During his presidency, he was constantly attacked and insulted by his political rivals, often in the most personal and vicious terms. One of his cabinet members, Edwin Stanton, had once publicly referred to him as a long-armed ape. Yet, when Lincoln needed a Secretary of War to help him navigate the Civil War, he chose Stanton for his undeniable competence. When advisors reminded him of the past insult, Lincoln's response was a masterpiece of Stoic silence in action. He didn't confront Stanton, demand an apology, or hold a grudge. He simply ignored the past provocation as something that did not matter in the face of the greater national goal. His silent choice to overlook the personal slight and focus on the bigger picture not only prevented a petty conflict, but also allowed him to harness the talents of a brilliant man who became instrumental in saving the Union. Lincoln's silence wasn't weakness, it was the ultimate strength of a leader secure enough to transcend ego for a higher purpose. Now, bring this concept into your own life for a moment. Think about the last argument you found yourself in. It might have been a heated text exchange, a disagreement with a customer service agent, or a tense moment with a neighbor. Replay the incident in your mind. What was the true root of the conflict? Was it a matter of deep principle, or was it more about a perceived slight, a difference of opinion on a trivial matter, or simply a bad mood colliding with another bad mood? Now imagine an alternate path. Imagine if, at the very first sign of rising tension, you had consciously chosen the Stoic shield of silence, not a cold, punishing silence, but a calm, deliberate pause. What if you had simply not responded to that inflammatory text for an hour? What if you had taken a deep breath and said, "I need to think about that," instead of instantly firing back? How might the energy of that interaction have shifted? It's likely the entire conflict would have de-escalated. simply because you refused to add your fuel to the fire. Your silence would have created a void where anger and misunderstanding could simply burn themselves out, leaving space for a more reasonable and peaceful resolution to emerge, or perhaps revealing that no resolution was even necessary because the battle was never worth fighting in the first place. The wisest leaders speak little because they are always learning, and this humility is the very engine of their continuous growth. This isn't a passive state of being quiet. It's an active, disciplined expression of intellectual humility, a conscious admission that no matter how much we know, there is always infinitely more we do not. In a world that often rewards the appearance of certainty, choosing silence is a courageous act of vulnerability. It means being comfortable with not having the immediate answer, with openly acknowledging the gaps in our understanding, and with prioritizing the pursuit of wisdom over the protection of our own ego. This stance of a perpetual student, forever open to new information and perspectives, is what allows for genuine and never-ending improvement, both personally and professionally. It transforms every interaction from a potential test of our knowledge into an opportunity to expand it. This idea finds its deepest roots not just in Stoicism, but in the figure of Socrates, a philosopher the Stoics deeply admired and whose methods they embraced. His most famous declaration, "I know that I know nothing," is perhaps the ultimate statement of intellectual humility. Socrates wasn't claiming to be utterly ignorant. He was exposing the critical difference between true wisdom and the arrogant illusion of knowledge. He understood that the first and most important step toward learning anything is to empty your cup, to recognize the limits of your current understanding, and create a space of receptive silence where new knowledge can settle. The Stoics took this Socratic principle and made it a core part of their daily practice. They believed that the person who believes they have nothing left to learn has effectively ended their own growth, sealing themselves off from the vast, ever-changing complexity of the world. Their silence, therefore, was a form of active readiness, a constant preparation for the next lesson. We can see a powerful modern embodiment of this principle in the leadership of Satya Nadella at Microsoft. When he took over as CEO in 2014, the company was widely seen as past its prime, plagued by a stagnant culture of internal competition and know-it-all arrogance. Nadella's first and most transformative act wasn't a grand strategic announcement, it was a shift in posture. He openly stated that he needed to listen and learn. He began a listening tour not to dictate his vision but to quietly absorb the insights, frustrations, and ideas of employees at all levels. He famously encouraged a learn-it-all culture over a know-it-all culture. This wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was an operational mandate that valued curiosity over certainty. By modeling this humility himself, by speaking less and listening more, he gave everyone in the company permission to admit what they didn't know, to ask questions, and to collaborate in search of better answers. His silent, receptive leadership didn't signal weakness. It unleashed a tidal wave of innovation and empathy that completely revitalized the company, precisely because it created the psychological safety for continuous learning to flourish. This practice of learning through silence is something we can all integrate into our daily lives in the most practical ways. It often shows up in how we handle one of the most common yet challenging moments, receiving critical feedback. Our ego's immediate, defensive reaction is to explain, to justify, to interrupt with our side of the story. We listen only to form a rebuttal, effectively building a wall between ourselves and the potential lesson contained in the criticism. The Stoic approach, infused with Socratic humility, would be to do the opposite. It would be to receive the feedback in complete silence, not as an attack but as data. To listen to every word without interruption, to quiet the internal voice of defense, and to truly hear the perspective being offered. In that silent space, you can ask yourself, even if this is delivered poorly, is there a kernel of truth here? What can I learn about how my actions are perceived? How can this make me better? This shift turns a moment of potential conflict into a pure opportunity for growth. I want to prompt you to make this incredibly personal and immediate. Before this day is over, identify one specific opportunity to consciously practice this form of learning through silence. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It could be in your next conversation with a coworker, when they are explaining a concept you think you already understand. Resist the urge to finish their sentences or show that you know. Instead, just listen with the openness that they might reveal a new nuance you'd never considered. It could be when a family member offers you unsolicited advice. Instead of dismissing it outright, swallow your retort and spend 30 seconds genuinely considering their point of view. Or it could be when you make a mistake. Instead of launching into excuses, simply say, "I don't know how to do that yet. Can you show me?" Choose one of these moments today and embrace the silent, humble posture of a learner. See if it doesn't open a door to a piece of understanding that your certainty had kept firmly locked. Patience in speech doesn't weaken your message, it strengthens it. This might seem paradoxical. We're often taught that to be persuasive, we need to be quick, assertive, and forceful, to seize the moment before it slips away. But the Stoics reveal a deeper truth. Real persuasive power isn't about the speed of your delivery, it's about the weight of your words. When you consciously choose to wait, to listen first, and to speak only after careful consideration, you aren't hesitating, you're building. You are constructing a foundation of credibility and trust that makes your eventual message far more impactful and difficult to ignore. Deliberate communication signals that your words are not mere reactions, but the product of reasoned judgment, and that inherent thoughtfulness commands a level of respect that rapid-fire opinions simply cannot achieve. It transforms your speech from noise into a signal, ensuring that when you finally do speak, people stop to listen. Marcus Aurelius, constantly navigating the treacherous waters of imperial politics, understood this intimately. He wrote in his private meditations, "Let every word and action be that of a man who can depart from life this very moment." While this sounds dramatic, its application to communication is profoundly practical. He isn't suggesting we be morbid. He is advocating for a level of intentionality so high that we would stand by every word we utter, even if it were our last. This is the essence of measured words. It forces us to ask, is this necessary? Is this true? Is this kind? Is this the best possible way to express this idea? When we subject our speech to this rigorous standard, we automatically slow down. We choose our moments with care. We ensure that our words are not just heard, but that they land with the full force of our integrity behind them, making them infinitely more persuasive because they are so clearly aligned with virtue and reason. Consider the stark contrast between two different ways of making a critical request. Imagine an employee who needs a raise. The first approach is rushed and reactive. They've had a frustrating week, feel overworked and undervalued, and they burst into their manager's office in a state of high emotion. Their plea is a torrent of complaints. "I can't keep doing this, the workload is impossible, I'm completely burnt out, and I really need more money now." While their feelings may be entirely valid, this delivery is likely to trigger defensiveness. The manager hears a problem, an ultimatum, and a list of grievances. They feel attacked and under pressure, and their instinct will be to protect the budget and manage the conflict, not to reward the employee. Now, picture the second approach, guided by Stoic patience. The same employee feels the same pressure, but they consciously delay the immediate urge to vent. They schedule a formal meeting, giving the request the gravity it deserves. They use the intervening time to prepare not a list of complaints, but a reasoned case. They gather data on their contributions, research market rates for their role, and outline their future value to the company. In the meeting, they listen first, asking about the team's goals and challenges. When it's time to speak, they present their case calmly and factually, connecting their request to the broader success of the organization. This well-timed, thoughtful request is not a plea, it's a proposal. It's persuasive because it's built on patience and reason, not emotion and impulse. The manager is far more likely to see the employee as a strategic partner worth investing in, rather than a problem to be managed. This principle of strategic delay can transform your everyday interactions, turning potential conflicts into opportunities for influence. The next time you find yourself in a conversation where you have an important point to make, I encourage you to try a simple experiment. Resist the powerful urge to state your core thesis right at the beginning. Instead, make a conscious choice to delay your key point. Start by asking questions. Explore the other person's perspective thoroughly. Let the conversation breathe. By holding your main idea back, you create a sense of anticipation and demonstrate that you are genuinely engaged in a dialogue, not just waiting for your turn to monologue. When you finally do introduce your perspective, it will be woven into the fabric of the existing discussion, making it feel like a natural and inevitable conclusion rather than an opposing argument. You'll likely find that this small act of patience makes your message land with more authority, more resonance, and far greater persuasive power than you ever thought possible. Mindfulness and Stoicism share a profound focus on responsive, not reactive, speech. At first glance, they might seem like distant cousins, one an ancient Western philosophy, the other often associated with Eastern meditation practices. But both converge on the same essential truth. The space between an external event and our internal reaction is where our freedom and our power truly reside. This isn't about emptying your mind or achieving a state of blissful detachment. It's about the intensely practical discipline of creating just enough mental room to choose your words with intention, ensuring they align with your values rather than your fleeting emotions. It's the difference between being a puppet jerked around by every string of provocation and being the puppeteer, consciously directing your own performance in the world. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus gave us perhaps the clearest operating manual for this practice. He instructed, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, 'Hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent.' Let me put you to the test." This is mindfulness in its purest Stoic form. That, hold on a moment, is the entire game. It's the conscious insertion of a pause between the stimulus, the critical email, the frustrating comment, the unexpected demand, and your response. In that momentary gap, you reclaim your agency. You move from being a reactor, whose words are dictated by an unchallenged initial impression, to a responder, whose words are chosen through the filter of wisdom and virtue. One of the most accessible techniques for creating this gap is something we all carry with us everywhere: our breath. It's a built-in physiological reset button. When you feel that familiar surge of heat that signals an impulsive reaction, try this. Before you type a single word in an email reply or open your mouth to speak, simply take one conscious, deliberate breath. Inhale slowly for a count of 4 and exhale even more slowly for a count of 6. This is not a magical cure for anger, but it is a powerful circuit breaker. That extra oxygen helps calm your nervous system, and the focused attention on your breath forcibly pulls your mind away from the narrative of outrage or defensiveness that was starting to spin. It creates the very space Epictetus described, allowing you to put the impression to the test. Is this email actually an attack, or is it just poorly worded? Is my urge to retaliate serving any purpose other than feeding my own ego? That single breath can be the difference between a response you'll regret and one you'll be proud of. This practice finds a perfect application in our modern world of digital communication. How many of us have fired off an angry email only to experience a sinking feeling of regret the moment we hit send? A simple method to apply Stoic mindfulness here is to institute a personal rule for any message that triggers a strong emotional response. Do not reply immediately. If the feeling is particularly intense, get up and walk away from your device for 5 minutes. If it's more moderate, simply write your draft reply. Get all that raw reaction out of your system, but then leave it in your drafts folder. Do not put a recipient's address in the to field until you have reviewed it later. Come back to it after 30 minutes or even after lunch. Reread it with fresh eyes, and almost invariably, you will find ways to temper your language, clarify your intent, and remove the emotional charge, transforming a reactive missile into a constructive communication. This isn't about being disingenuous, it's about allowing your best self, rather than your most triggered self, to represent you in the world. Tomorrow, I want to invite you to turn your day into a living laboratory for this principle. You don't need to meditate for an hour or change your entire life. Just choose one single interaction and experiment with this mindful pause. It could be as simple as feeling the urge to interrupt a colleague in a meeting. Instead, you take that one breath and let them finish their thought. It could be when your partner says something that slightly rubs you the wrong way. Rather than snapping back with a sarcastic comment, you feel the impulse arise, you notice it, and you choose to simply nod and let it pass. There's no need to make a grand announcement about what you're doing. This is a private practice of personal mastery. Just once tomorrow, create that space. Insert that breath between the impulse and the action, and then pay close attention to what happens next. Does the conversation take a different turn? Do you feel a greater sense of control? You might just discover that the most powerful word in your vocabulary is not a word at all, but a moment of conscious, chosen silence. Stoic leaders know when to speak and when to act. Silence is part of the strategy. This is a crucial distinction that separates Stoic practice from mere passivity or disengagement. The silence we've been exploring isn't about withdrawing from the world or avoiding responsibility. It's a dynamic and intentional pause, a period of strategic preparation that makes subsequent action far more precise, powerful, and virtuous. It's the quiet of a chess master studying the board, not the quiet of a spectator who has left the game. This disciplined restraint creates the mental and emotional space necessary to discern the right course of action, ensuring that when you do move, your actions are not reckless reactions but calculated, effective steps toward a meaningful goal. It transforms silence from an absence of noise into a presence of potential energy, coiled and ready to be released with purpose. The Stoic ideal of balancing restraint with decisive action was perfectly embodied by Cotto the Younger, a figure whose life was a testament to principled defiance. While history remembers Cotto for his unwavering and very public opposition to the corruption of Julius Caesar, his true strength lay in his mastery of timing. He understood that not every battle required a public speech. Some required silent, meticulous planning and the patience to wait for the decisive moment to act. His restraint was not a weakness but a source of immense power, allowing him to choose his battles wisely and conserve his energy for the fights that truly mattered. He lived the philosophy that true strength is knowing when to hold your ground in silence and when to advance with unwavering conviction, a lesson in strategic patience that resonates through the ages. We can see this principle play out with stunning clarity in the military strategy of General George Washington, during the American Revolutionary War. The winter of 1777 at Valley Forge stands as a powerful testament to strategic silence in action. Washington's army was not engaged in dramatic battles during those frigid months. Instead, they were encamped, enduring immense hardship, training, and reorganizing in relative silence away from the main theater of conflict. To an outside observer or to the anxious Continental Congress, this might have looked like passivity or even cowardice, a refusal to engage the enemy. But Washington, embodying that stoic balance, knew this period of quiet withdrawal was not avoidance. It was essential preparation. That silent, brutal winter was a strategic pause used to build a more disciplined professional army. The suffering endured and the lessons learned in that quiet camp were what ultimately transformed a ragged group of volunteers into a force capable of defeating the British Army. The decisive actions that followed, the victories that won the war, were directly made possible by that earlier period of silent, enduring preparation. This interplay between quiet preparation and decisive action is just as relevant off the battlefield. Consider an entrepreneur who has a groundbreaking idea. The impulsive reaction is to shout it from the rooftops immediately, to launch a website, and to start selling before the concept is fully formed. This often leads to wasted energy, misguided efforts, and early failure. The entrepreneurial approach infused with Stoic strategy would involve a period of intentional silence first. This doesn't mean doing nothing. It means quietly conducting market research, developing a robust business plan, building a prototype, and listening intently to potential customers without the pressure of public announcement. This silent phase is a time of intense, focused action behind the scenes. When the entrepreneur finally does speak publicly and launch, they do so from a foundation of deep preparation, and their actions in the market are far more likely to be effective and impactful. The silence wasn't passive, it was the most active and strategic phase of the entire venture. I want to invite you to reflect on this balance in your own life. Look at a current goal or challenge you are facing. It could be professional, like a project at work, or personal, like improving a relationship or a skill. Ask yourself this: where might a period of strategic silence serve you better than immediate, visible action? Are you in a phase where you need to be loudly executing? Or are you in a phase where you need to be quietly listening, learning, planning, and preparing? Perhaps you've been feeling pressure to have all the answers right now, to be constantly productive in ways that are visible to others. What if the most productive thing you could do for your goal this week is to not say anything about it, but instead to dedicate time to silent research, thoughtful observation, or deep practice away from the spotlight? Understanding that silence and action are not opposites but partners in a strategic dance can help you allocate your energy more wisely, ensuring that when you do choose to act, your moves are so well informed and well timed that they carry the full weight of your quiet preparation behind them. So as we bring our exploration to a close, let's gather the core Stoic principles that illuminate why the most respected leaders so often choose to listen before they speak. We began with the foundational power of presence that practiced ability to be fully in the moment, setting aside distraction and ego to absorb what is truly happening, just as Cato the Younger demonstrated in the Roman Senate. From there, we saw how cognitive detachment creates a vital space between an event and our reaction, allowing us to examine our initial impressions with the calm reason of Marcus Aurelius rather than being swept away by raw emotion. We then explored the active discipline of silence itself, not as a passive void, but as a strategic choice that builds resilience, fosters deep trust, and allows for the clarity that emerges only in quiet reflection. And finally, we arrived at the pinnacle of this practice, Intentionality in communication, the commitment to ensuring that every word we utter is both true and necessary, a principle that transforms our speech from noise into a meaningful signal. When you weave these threads together, presence, detachment, patience, and intentionality, a clear and powerful picture emerges. Listening first is not a tactic, it is the embodiment of wisdom. It is a profound expression of respect for the people you lead and the situations you navigate. It signals that you value understanding over being understood, that you prioritize collective wisdom over individual opinion, and that your confidence comes from a deep inner stability, not from the volume of your voice. This approach builds a rare and powerful form of authority, one that is granted willingly by others because it is earned through humility, composure, and genuine respect. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, who offered so much wisdom on the power of restraint, provides a perfect closing thought for us. He wrote, "I shall never be ashamed of citing a bad author if the line is good." But perhaps even more fitting is his guidance from another letter. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. While he spoke of anger, the principle applies to all communication. That moment of delay, that conscious pause before we speak, is the greatest remedy for misunderstanding, for regret, and for missed opportunities to connect and learn. It is in that pause that we exercise true self-control, the master virtue that guides all others. Now, this journey through Stoic silence is meant to be lived, not just understood. I want to extend a direct challenge to you. For the next 7 days, choose just one silent practice to incorporate into your daily life. It might be committing to listen to the entire point in a meeting before formulating your response. It could be taking 5 minutes of solitude each morning to journal or simply breathe before the day begins. Perhaps it's the simple act of waiting 3 full seconds after someone finishes speaking before you reply. Choose one and practice it with intention. Observe the subtle shifts it creates in your interactions, your decision-making, and your own sense of inner calm. If these Stoic insights have resonated with you, and you're eager to bring more wisdom, resilience, and clarity into your life, consider subscribing to this channel. We delve into timeless philosophies and practical strategies to help you navigate modern life with more purpose and less stress. And I would genuinely love to hear from you. What was the most impactful lesson you're taking away from this discussion? What silent practice will you try? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and learn from each other. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all until the moment is right.